What up, nerds? This is Clay Cooper from Prep Expert. I've got 2 perfect scores on the SAT and 1 perfect score on the ACT. And today I'm going to teach you how to answer transitional word or phrase questions in the writing section of the SAT and the English section of the ACT. So transitional word or phrase questions occur a lot on both the SAT and the ACT. These questions are mostly clarity questions. Rather than grammar questions, they test your understanding of the ideas being expressed in the passage rather than the rules of grammar. So especially on the SAT, what they typically look like is this. We'll have a bit of text, right? And then we'll have a transitional word or phrase underlined, and then a bit of text that follows it. And we have to have a rock-solid approach on this type of question. We need to approach this question consistently regardless of what word or phrase is underlined. In my experience, students who take an undisciplined approach on this type of question miss this question. But we really should never miss this kind of question. It's well within our reach. It's something that we can do well on. So let me show you the approach that I think you should take on a transitional word or phrase question. So whenever a transitional word or phrase is underlined, the first thing you should do is read what comes before it and read what comes after it. So we're always going to start by read what comes before and read what comes after. That's always the first step to take in a transitional word or phrase question. If I don't know what the idea is that's before and what the idea is that's after and how they relate to each other, I can't answer the question. So I always got to start by making sure I understand what was said right before it and what was said right after it. And then once I've read what comes before and what comes after, I'm going to ask myself, how do they relate to each other? If I can answer that question, then I'll be able to choose the right transition between the 2 sentences. So if the sentence before says one thing and the sentence that comes after contrasts with it, then I should be looking for a word that implies contrast. If the sentence that comes before is kind of a cause and the sentence that comes after is more of an effect, then I'm looking for a thus or a therefore. If the sentence that comes before illustrates a rule or articulates a rule and the sentence that comes after it gives me an example, then I'll be looking for a phrase like for instance or for example. So there are a number of different ways that what comes before could relate to what comes after, but I got to start by reading that thing that comes before, reading what comes after, and asking myself how they relate to each other. If you can answer the question in step number 2 here, you can probably get the question right overall. Let's take a look back at that example problem and we'll apply this strategy. So taking a look again at what we have here to read, we can see that the paragraph is a little bit shorter than you'll typically find on an actual SAT or ACT passage, but it's definitely long enough for us to apply our strategy. So let's first read what comes before and read what comes after. Most demographers operate on the assumption that working-age citizens will remain in their home countries, and demographic models, predictions, and policy recommendations are often based on this assumption. The reality is more complicated. Many studies show an increasing tide of emigration among educated young professionals. So it's important to understand that as I read what comes before and read what comes after, I want to ignore the underlined portion. So this word furthermore that's underlined there, it isn't real yet, right? So the word that they offer me as my first answer choice is just conjectural at this point. In other words, I shouldn't let it affect my understanding of what comes before and what comes after, because as of right now, it's just one choice among 4. It may not be correct. So what comes before is that demographers operate on the assumption that working age citizens will remain in their home countries and not leave their home countries. What comes after is the reality is more complicated. Many studies show an increasing tide of emigration among educated young professionals. So it sounds like what comes before is that demographers assume people stay home. And what comes after is that in reality, that may not be the case. So there seems to be a little bit of a contrast here. The assumption that people stay home with the reality that maybe they don't. So I think we need some kind of transitional word or phrase that implies contrast. And there are a number of those. We could say however, or by contrast, or though. Any of those would be great choices to imply contrast between the assumption that comes before and the reality that comes afterward. Let's take a look at our answer choices. Again, the original answer choice was furthermore. I can now unblock it and take a look at what it says. Furthermore. Furthermore implies additional information. If I say A and then furthermore B, that implies that B is more information along the same lines of A. That doesn't imply any contrast, and I think we have a strong element of contrast here, so I don't think that's our answer. What about B? For instance. For instance is a transitional phrase that you would use when you're introducing an example. If you're about to describe an instance of a thing that you just described, then you'd use that phrase. So for instance, if I say, some states have capital cities that are named after the state, I could then offer an example of that or an instance. For instance, Oklahoma City in Oklahoma. So I'm giving one example of a trend that I described, and that is an example of for instance. That's not what's happening here, though. Again, there's no contrast. What about C, additionally? Additionally is just more information in accordance with what I just told you. That's not what's happening here either. We do have some significant contrast, though, so I think however is perfect. The last step I should take on a question like this is reread it with the word that I chose plugged in to make sure that it sounds good and makes sense with that choice. So let's see. Most demographers operate on the assumption that working age citizens will remain in their home countries. And demographic models, predictions, and policy recommendations are often based on this assumption. The reality, however, is more complicated. Many studies show an increasing tide of emigration among educated young professionals. I think however here is perfect. Again, we have the assumption that people won't leave, and the reality, however, that they do. So D is our answer. So that's all I've got for you today. Please don't forget to throw us a like if you found this video helpful. You can also subscribe to Prep Expert's YouTube channel for other videos just like this one. In fact, we'd love it if you'd leave us a comment below this video. Let us know what you want advice on from a 2-time perfect score in our next video. We might feature your suggestion as the topic for our next video. You can also find a coupon code in the description below this video that you can use on our website, prepexpert.com, for discounts on all of our products. You can sign up for a course with myself or another instructor, or sign up for tutoring if you'd prefer that. So until next time, keep working hard.